Okay, let's look at part 2 of lesson 10.7. We're on page 454. In this one, we have a couple of problems, but they're just giving us some visual ways of thinking about time, of looking at time and solving some time problems, because sometimes just the numbers are hard to deal with since it's split up into increments of 60 seconds is 1 minute, 60 minutes is an hour. It's not always that easy to work with time. And a lot of times you'll see it as fractions or decimals, and then you have your standard way of having time that we have. So it can be a little bit difficult. So let's use some visuals to help us break down this problem. Monica spent 2.5 hours working on her computer. Looks like that's Monica right there. If she started working at 10:30 a.m., what time did Monica stop working? Well, here we have a timeline, and it starts at 10:30. And I can assume by looking at it and showing this jump right there, and they put the number 1. So I assume that that's saying that it's taking a 1-hour jump here. So if I go from 10:30 and I go 1 hour forward, then I'm looking at 11:30. Notice when I jump an hour forward, or I add an hour, I'm adding an hour in the hour column. I'm adding 1 to 10 to get 11, but the 30 stays the same. The 30 is not going to change because I'm only adding hours. I'm not adding any minutes right now. So since she said it says 2.5 hours, that means I'm going to have to add 1 more hour. So I added 1 hour. I'm going to add another hour, which is a full jump from the big line to the next big line. Notice we're jumping the smaller lines. The smaller lines are going to indicate half an hour because they're halfway between the hour. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you. So that means that if I'm jumping 1 more hour, I'm looking at 12:30 time. Okay, and remember the clock goes 1 through 12. I can see here 1 through 12, and then it's going to reset back to 1. That's important to remember as I go forward on the next jump, because my next jump is only going to be half. Okay, that's why I had to know that the small line is a half, because my next jump there is a half. Well, if I'm going 10:30 to 11:30 to 12:30, and then I make a 1/2 of a jump, I'm not adding anything here. I'm adding it to the minutes column. And here it gives me a reminder that half an hour is 30 minutes. And that's because 1 hour equals 60 minutes, right? So half of 60 equals 30. Okay, so that means I'm going to add 30 minutes over here. Well, this is where time gets tricky, because if I have 12:30 and I add 30 minutes, I could think of it adding that way. I'm adding 0 hours, I'm adding 30 minutes, I'm going to get 60, and I'm going to get 1260. But 1260 isn't a time, because remember, 60 minutes equals an hour. So I'm going to carry this hour over to 12. But what happens when I carry an hour past 12? I'm back at 1. So the time actually is going to be 1 o'clock. And this is why working with time can be confusing, right? Because I'm switching over to my next hour after only 60, not 100, which I'm normally used to with numbers, but only after 60. So we could see that adding half an hour to 12:30 doesn't take me to 1260. It takes me to 1 o'clock. Okay? And I could look at that here. They did the same thing as the number line above on the clock here, where you start at 10:30 notice the hour hand is in between the 10 and the 11 here. It's not pointed at the 10, it's not pointed at the 11. It's somewhere in between. So when they make the jumps, they're actually jumping in between the hours. From 10:30 to 11:30, 11:30 to 12:30. And only when they make that half-hour jump does it hit the actual full hour sign. So she stopped working at 1 o'clock. Right, as if that wasn't confusing, let's try this one, and we're going to deal with quarter of an hour now. Robert's soccer team needs to be off the soccer field by 12:15 p.m. Each game is at most 1 3/4 hours long. What time should the game begin to be sure that the team finishes on time? Okay, well, if 1/4 or 1/4 of an hour is 15 minutes, 3/4 of an hour is how many minutes? There's a couple ways you can think about that if you're not sure. 3/4 of an hour. Oopsie, I already made a mistake. That's why it's good to have scratch paper. Let's go to our scratch paper. Okay. 1/4 of an hour equals 15 minutes. 3/4 equals 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. So that means it also equals 15 plus 15 plus 15, because each of those 3/4, each fourth equals 15, or the same as 3 times 15. But I know that 15 plus 15 plus 15 is going to give me 45. So 3/4 of an hour is 45 minutes. Now, unlike the last one where we're going from one time forward to another time, we're actually working backwards because we're trying to see when they should start. We know when they have to end. They have to end by 12:15, but they need to start an hour and 35 or an hour and 3/4 minutes before. And we know 3/4 is 45 minutes, which means they have to start an hour and 45 minutes before. All right, so first we're going to subtract the minutes. Okay, so 45 minutes earlier from 12:15, I'm going to go back, and that's going to lead me to a 30. Okay, again, I could think of it like this. Now, why it's hard to think of it like this is because, again, I'm not working over 100 like I'm used to. I'm working over 60. So this actually will be 30. And I need to take away 1. That's why I don't like doing it this way. I need to think of it as jumping backwards. So I go 3/4 of an hour back, which means I'm at the half an hour, right? But I also have to know that my hour is jumping back 3/4 as well, which means it's actually going to be 11:30. So 45 minutes earlier than 12:15 is going to be 11:30. Now, remember, I need to start an hour and 3/4 earlier. So an hour and 45 minutes earlier is, now I need to jump back another hour. So it's actually going to be 10:30. So the game should begin at 10:30. If it begins later, then they may not leave on time. Okay, and I know time can be tricky, so you may need to review this a few times to get it. Pun intended. All right, so what I want you to work on today is page 455, or tomorrow. Work over the next couple days on that. 455 and 456. Try your hands at 1 through 12 and see if you can do number 13 for a little bit of extra challenge. Once you've done that, I'd like you to complete Chapter 10 review test. I think I have that scheduled for Friday. But if you can get started earlier, I would suggest that because it is kind of a long test. And that's on page 457. And it goes all the way to 462. There's 22 questions covering all the things we've learned in this chapter. Please try your best. And I will most likely put up the answers next week. All right, but let me know how you do. Let me know how you did, how you think you did, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. All right.